Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Ronan Time HD, and this week what we found off the shelf was...
George Orwell's vision became the world's biggest-selling futuristic novel. Now, 1984 has been brought to the screen with a cast to match its stature. John Hurt, the solitary rebel.
There is truth, and there is untruth, even if I am alone.
Richard Burton in his last screen role, hypnotic, sinister.
You asked me once what was in room 101. The thing that is in room 101 is the worst thing in the world.
Suzanna Hamilton, the girl whose love can transform a secret dream into a dangerous reality.
They can't get inside you. They can't get to your heart.
1984, released in 1984. Perfect timing. Starring John Hurt, Suzanna Hamilton, Cyril Cusack, and Cusack. I'm very sorry. And Richard Burton. This film is an adaptation of the literary classic of the same name, written by the legendary George Orwell. And this film is a dystopian drama or social commentary. This film, I think... I'm just going to jump straight into it. I think that this film is incredibly well done. I really like the fact that John Hurt, Winston, our main character, he's not really anybody important. He's just a cog in the machine. He's just some random guy. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the fact that we are getting just a very small slice of the totalitarian regime that is Oceania. I really do enjoy how we barely even really get a glimpse at what's truly going on. I like how there's a lot of room for assumptions and interpretations and stuff like that. I really do enjoy how we're almost as lost as just a random civilian would be. We're kind of in the dark the whole time, and you can't, of course, with this, you cannot trust a single solitary word that the government Oceania says in this entire movie. You cannot trust a single goddamn thing that they say. And I appreciate how consistent the movie is with that. I appreciate how you doubt everything they say on the TV. Everything they say on the TV is bullshit. And I have a theory, which if there's people that have talked about 1984, it might be popular, might not be. They say they're at a war with East Asia or Africa or whatever. I don't even think there's a real war going on. I think they are just... saying they're in a war, and they're masquerading that they're in a war so that they can rally their brainwashed, people into being like, yeah, rah, Oceania, let's go for our country, right? Hooray for our side, essentially. And so they can also have an excuse for not having rations or chocolate or sugar. They're like, oh, well, it's war times, you got a limited supply. But I have a theory that since you can't trust a goddamn thing the government says, why would they actually be at war? Why wouldn't they just lie about that to control the people even more? Because the whole thing about this film is control, right? I think that's kind of the thing is surveillance and control. I mean, Big Brother is watching, right? But people see that, but I think there's a bigger picture there because but I think this film generally, while yes, it is about surveillance, I think it is more about the control and how authoritarian governments want to control everything that the people do, think, and see and hear. So essentially, they control the media. They control they control the media, they control what people say, they control what they eat, they control what they do, they control their jobs. They control basically everything in their life, and they even control their thoughts. You can't even think freely in this dystopian future, and obviously, who wouldn't want to be a free thinker, right? You don't want to be a sheep, you don't want to conform to, I guess... conforming in a sense where you're not a person, right? You're basically just a cog in a machine, endlessly going until you fall off, and then they put a new cog in there without any care, essentially. I just really think that this film is really well executed in just showing how it's so dreary and hopeless, and it's just so fascinating in that sense. I really enjoyed how the film, there was no good ending, really. There was no real hope at the end of the film. I mean, the whole film, there's TVs, and there's, in the background, there's always, like, a picture of Big Brother looking at you, and I always really appreciate how Big Brother isn't always looking at the main character. Sometimes he's looking dead into the camera, and it feels like he's watching you. I really like that direction choice. I really enjoy that. I also really liked how whenever the TVs were on the whole time, because you couldn't turn them off. You had to listen to propaganda 24/7 all day. And there would always be people confessing about how they were, conspirers with, Goldstein. He's, like, the big evil, rebel bad guy, right? That the whole town, the whole city wants to... Basically, he's like the traitor. They want him dead, and he's like against the state. He's against the party, so he's the bad guy, right? And he wrote this book that was basically like a book of heresy against the state, against the country, where it basically criticized the whole country and state and kind of exposed their inner workings and their philosophies. But it's revealed later in the film that that book was written by the state. It was written by the party to give the people a common enemy, to hate, to unite them more, so that they would be rah-rah for our side, right? Which is interesting, and I did not see that coming. Or possibly, it could be he just told him that he helped write it, like the book that Goldstein wrote, to make Winston not believe that Goldstein was real, so that he wouldn't actually believe in the cause. Like, oh, the state just created it, so it's not real. But maybe he is real. And again, you can't trust a goddamn thing the government says. Even when they're torturing him, you probably can't believe a single word they say. And that's so fascinating to me. There's so much room for interpretation in what the party says in this. And the way they twist their words and the way they articulate themselves is very... calculated, I guess is a way to say. They're cold, and they are very, I guess, cutthroat maybe is a good word. They, I guess, are unforgiving. If you make one slip up, you're done, essentially. And one thing I did really like is throughout the whole film, there was, people confessing on the TV, right? Saying they're enemies of the state, this and that. And at the end of the film, Winston, John Hurt, and Suzanna Hamilton, they were captured by the party, by Oceana, and they were tortured to love Big Brother, right? They were tortured into believing in the country and only loving, they don't love anything else aside from Big Brother and the party. That's all they love, and they will never love anything else. That's all they'll care about. And in the film, after he's released from this, torture, dungeon, he's on the TV, spouting the same nonsense that every other person that was giving a confession was saying. And it's just, so, it's a nice callback. There's, a lot of decent callbacks in this, where it's a good thematic setup, I guess is a good way to put it. And one thing I really liked is the 2 + 2 = 4, 5, 3. I really enjoyed that. I think that's probably my favorite, I guess, philosophy in the film. It's a very good method of, I guess, brainwashing. I'm not saying I like brainwashing. I'm just saying I really liked the concept of it, because it was very interesting. And they didn't want him to... So essentially, they would put up 4 fingers, and they wanted him to say 5 or 3 or whatever. But they didn't want him to just say there were 5 fingers. They wanted him to believe there were 5 fingers. They wanted him to genuinely believe they were holding up 5 fingers. And essentially the whole idea of it was they wanted him to... They decide what he thinks, right? They decide what he does and doesn't think is what something is, if that makes sense. I think it's really interesting. And at the end of the film, when he's released, and he's talking to Julia in the cafe, he's playing chess with himself, and on the dusty table, he writes 2 + 2 =, but we never see what he puts afterwards. So perhaps, maybe he did conform to the machine, or maybe he's still fighting. Maybe he's still got some resistance left in him. And I really liked how they never showed what he put. They never showed it, so they left it up to interpretation. Did he fall to the machine, or is he still fighting? I really like that idea. And I also really like how at the end, like, he would basically just ignore the TV the whole movie and, like, just do nothing, basically. He would just kind of ignore it and write in his journal. But at the end, he's watching the TV intently, and he's basically like, that's wonderful news. But the thing is, it doesn't sound like he means it. To me, he sounds miserable, because he is. I mean, frickin' everybody's miserable in that country. Everybody's fucking miserable. In Oceania, doesn't look like a very happy place. But I don't know. He just looked, I guess, broken, which I think is interesting because one of the, I guess, political enemies earlier in the film had his confession, and he was in the same cafe, like, basically looking the exact same. So you'd assume that they did the same shit that they did to Winston to their political enemies, which would make sense, right? They have to swear their allegiance to the party, to the state, and it's like a vicious cycle, kind of. They just do it to anybody who gets a different idea in their head. And this is not, the movie's not subtle, but it doesn't have to be, and it's not trying to be. I think sometimes with messages like this, with, you know, stories like this, with, I guess, commentaries like this, you can't really be subtle. It kind of has to be on the nose. But I've been rambling for a bit too long here. I just really enjoy the concepts of this film, and I really enjoy the way it's executed. And I think it's very well done. And with that being said, would I recommend this film? I think so. Yeah, I think I would recommend it. If you're a fan of dystopian films, if you're a fan of, I guess, commentaries, social commentaries, political commentaries, dramas, I think this film has a lot going for it in that regard, and I think there's a lot to enjoy about it in that aspect, and I would recommend it in that case. And overall, it's just a solid film. It's a very solid film. And with that being said, what would I rate this film? I think I'd rate this film a 7.5 out of 10. And, yeah, I think I've said what I need to say. Thanks for my piece. So guys, I hope you like this video. Share it with your friends. Subscribe. Turn those notifications on. Comment down below if you liked it. And I'm in HG, off to join the resistance. If it exists. I mean, hey, it might not. The government says it does, and you can't trust the damn thing the government says, so maybe there isn't a resistance. Maybe I gotta create my own resistance. Which, good fucking luck with that. So, apparently, this film had a little controversy, a little scandal when it first came out, due to, there was an original orchestral score that was, composed by, I believe, 2 collaborating composers, that was, implemented into the film, but I believe a couple months before its theatrical release, Eurythmics were hired to basically replace the original orchestral score with, I guess, like, you know, Eurythmics, like, 80s pop soundtrack songs and stuff, which I did not listen to. I think we listened to the original, composition, I guess, or the original orchestral version. But is the Eurythmics version worth listening to? Maybe we should look for it. Leave it down in the comments. Is the Eurythmics score worth checking out? Is it any good? Or is it garbo? Is it trash? Probably not. It's probably good. But I don't know. I haven't listened to it, so let me know. Don't spoil anything. Just tell me if it's worth listening to, or guys, I don't know. Maybe it adds to the experience.